Hi folks, Slick Slices here. Just a sort of quick follow-up to Tobias's video last night about the Bose, Tony Bose Swayback that Case do. And just something that occurred to me, now this is purely speculation, there is nothing in this that I know, well, some of it I know, but the connection with the Bose Swayback is purely conjecture. Now I don't have a Case Swayback, so I'm having to substitute the Rough Rider micarta work knife, which there are two iterations. I happen to have them both. This one, funnily enough, the black one I actually got from Tobias. He sent it to me, and the other one came from Big Red EDC. Now these are actually larger than the Tony Bose design and slightly different in terms of the fact these are bare heads with lanyard holes, but it's the closest I've got. But what I really wanted to talk about was where I saw the Swaybacks, perhaps it's Genesis. So if I take one of these out, and I'm going to show you something else. I have a few of these. I don't have one in micarta. I tend to have them in more traditional materials. But this is the Ettrick pattern. This particular one is one by Stephen Cocker, but you know, we could equally have, just move that up a little bit, we could have one by Arthur Wright, or we'd have one of my latest ones, which is by Michael May. And in some ways this is starting to show some of the progression, in that this has a you know, a butt bolster as well. It's not a bare head, unlike the others. But this, the original, well, there's two parts to it. There's the Swayback and there's the Wharncliffe blade. But the point I was sort of trying to make is that I thought that the Tony Bose Swayback knife is kind of a fat Ettrick, because the Ettrick's a very slim, slender knife. And this isn't a great, the Rough Rider isn't a great substitute for the Tony Bose, because it's relatively little in terms of way of the Swayback, and it's very straight on blade to handle. But it's the closest I've got, so I had to do that. Now the Ettrick, the Wharncliffe blade is found in many forms. The Ettrick is probably the most well known, but there are other really quite long dated traditional knives. I'll stick with the Stag, because for no other reason than I have Stag in most of the patterns, not all the patterns that I'm going to show. This is the Taylor's Eyewitness pen knife, and it has a small pen blade, but it has a Wharncliffe blade at the other end. So, you know, which came first? I suspect that the Ettrick is probably closer to the origins of the Wharncliffe, because Lord Wharncliffe is claimed to be the inventor, or he and his gamekeeper, which I suspect probably means his gamekeeper came up with it, and Lord Wharncliffe said, "Oh, that's a wonderful idea," showed it to all his friends, and of course they will always call it after the Lord rather than his indentured servant, which is a little bit unfair, but unfortunately that's the way of the worlds, or the way the worlds were. So Lord Wharncliffe gets the adoration, and it's named after him, and everybody knows the Wharncliffe. Now, Lord Wharncliffe was a country lord, country gent in Yorkshire, so they wanted a knife that was particularly good for dressing small game, sort of rabbits and down. And the little Wharncliffe blade with a quite large handle is ideal for the dressing of such game. So in terms of, just to give you an idea of the size, because this is these are quite small knives, or small blades. The handles are, I mean, people who talk about handle blade efficiency will hate these, because you've got a 2-inch cutting edge, 2 3/8 blade length, total length of over 6 inches, so that's giving you a handle length of 4 inches. So you could easily have a 3-inch blade in that, and it would work perfectly well. But the smaller blade is what's required for the dressing of smaller game. So I suspect that's the earliest iteration, but this penknife pattern goes back quite a long way as well. So who knows the actual answer to that. But there was something about the way that the blade came about, and I'm going to just show you something else that kind of maybe shows some of the iterative process. Now, this here isn't a Wharncliffe, but it could easily have been. You know, for example, this is another Ettrick. Just briefly show you this, another Michael May Ettrick. So, in fact, I get the two Michael May Ettricks. Make more sense that way. So it's the same knife, but this one has what's called a peach pruner. So it's a bit like a Wharncliffe, only with a little bit of curve to the blade. So if we kind of step back from the really quite, I mean, what makes a Wharncliffe, I should really have said, straight blade and a curve coming down to a point. So you actually get quite a pokey point on it, and you don't have the corner that you might have had with say a lamb's foot. But we'll come back to that lamb's foot in a second. So if you sort of take that, you look at that, and it's basically the same knife. I think the blade is a touch longer, but I think that's just there's no law that says it has to be. But anyway, this is the with a peach pruner blade in an Ettrick handle. Here we have, move these up a bit. We have the same peach pruner blade, still with a swayback handle, but that could easily be this pattern, which is a lamb's foot, which still has the swayback handle, but it has a lamb's foot blade. Although with the swedge, you can see that that's tending towards the Ettrick. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for there to have been a bit of crossover here. Of course, these knives have developed in their own separate directions. You know, the peach pruner could be the half pruner. So there's the peach pruner, these peach pruner blades. There's a half pruner blade, just another tailor's eyewitness. And then there's only a matter of time before you see that coming on to a full pruner, gardener's knife, which is also, in America, it would be called a hawkbill. I think hawkbill because Americans wouldn't like the idea of being known as being gardeners, but the hawkbill sounds much more aggressive and meaty. So let's zoom out a little bit, and we can see, I'll just line these up to give you some idea of a progression. And maybe you'll see from this why I kind of think of the Bose knife as being a progression, perhaps, or a fat version of the Ettrick knife with a Wharncliffe blade. Now, that may seem like I'm insulting Tony Bose and saying he wasn't original, but I would say quite the opposite. One thing that Tobias said to me in the comments last night is that Tony Bose claimed not to invent new knives, but simply to breathe new life into old patterns. And so there we are, keep it short at that. but I hope you can see where I think that there is a family resemblance between these swayback knives particularly and the Tony Bose swayback with a Wharncliffe blade. The case do now. So there we are. Thank you very much. Bye.